What is up, homies? My name is Felix and I'm here back again with another video for you all today. And today in this one, I'm going to be doing something that I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to be explaining every single effect plugin. So this basically means all the commonly used effects plugins that are probably stock within whatever DAW you might be using. So we're going to be talking about equalizers, compressors, limiters, chorus, saturation, all that good stuff and more. So I'll try to give you guys like a little basic explanation, and then we'll go a little bit more into the science, the technicalities, if you will, of like how the plugin actually works. So this video should help you out if you're kind of a beginner producer or if you're a more advanced producer, because I definitely learned a lot while doing the research for this video. So yeah, make sure you guys go check out my Instagram and my SoundCloud down in the description below, along with the playlist of songs I produce, my beat store, my Discord, all that stuff. Go check it out if you'd like to do so. feezostore.com, copy yourself some fire drip, and now we can get into this video. So the first effect that I'm going to be talking about here today is an EQ or an equalizer. And basically an EQ just allows you to manipulate certain frequencies within a sound or sample. So basically in the whole frequency range, there's the low end frequencies, which are like ooh, and then there's the high end frequencies, which are like ooh. And an EQ basically allows you to adjust the volume of those specific frequencies within an actual sound. So as you can see right here in this EQ, the sample is taking up this area, but if we want to cut out maybe some of the high end, what you do is you just take this, and now you have mostly mid to low frequencies within that sound. This sample is actually a little extra thing that I threw into my new drum kit, which you can go check out for yourself. I'll leave a link in the description. So with most EQs, you're gonna have a couple points along the, EQ graph thing. These are the different EQ bands, and if you adjust the band width on each one of these, it basically just adjusts how wide the band is, not complicated stuff here. One tip that I can give though is that usually when it comes to EQ, less is more. You don't have to do big crazy curves and stuff like this. Just, keep it minimal. All right, so the next effect is the one that you've all been waiting for, compressors. This is like the one that just confuses everybody so much, but I think I have a pretty good explanation for it that'll help you understand it. So basically what a compressor does is it takes the loud parts of a sound and brings them down so that your sound is more uniform instead of, going all over the place like this. On any given compressor, you're gonna have a couple different parameters. You're gonna have a threshold, a ratio, an attack and release, and then probably a gain knob as well. The threshold is basically gonna be the level that you set where the compressor starts to work. So anything that goes over the threshold that you set is going to be affected by the compressor. So if we bring the threshold down to here, everything that goes over this blue line is gonna be having something happen to it from the compressor. However, it's not doing anything right now because our ratio is not set. The ratio is basically what determines how much that signal going over the threshold is going to be compressed by. And this is the thing that I think a lot of people get confused by, but basically your ratio is probably going to look something like 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 8-to-1, something like that. And that just basically means for every 8 decibels that you go over that threshold, it's gonna actually play 1 back as the compressed signal. Basically, the way that I remember it is for every first number that you go over the threshold, you get 1 back. So if that original input signal is going over the threshold by 4 and we have a 2-to-1 ratio, that means the volume is gonna be 2 decibels over the threshold as the output. And then basically the attack is how long it takes the original signal to be compressed down to the compressed signal. And then the release is the opposite, it's just how fast it goes back to the original signal. So that's all fine and dandy, the specifics and technicalities and everything. But I actually don't think about that when I use a compressor. I'm not sitting there like, I have to calculate out the specific threshold and ratio of this sample. I basically just compress stuff by listening to how it sounds. So I'll just turn down the threshold to like a good amount. Like where I set it around here is pretty much fine. And then just turn up the ratio a little bit until you get it to where it sounds like not super squashed and weird. So then since what a compressor is doing is lowering the volume, most compressors are gonna have a gain knob. And this basically just turns up the volume after you've compressed the signal so that it can be similar to whatever volume you had it before. But yeah, so the next one we're talking about is going to be a limiter. So a limiter is kind of similar to a compressor. However, with a limiter, nothing goes above the threshold that you choose. So there's usually going to be a knob that says ceiling or threshold. No volume gets past that. So anything that goes past that threshold is going to be squashed down. So you can see if we lower the ceiling down to like all the way down here, it's super quiet now. Some people do this on their master track so that nothing gets above 0 or -1 or -2 or something like that. I don't personally do that with a limiter, but it's one way that you could possibly use it. So the next effect that we're gonna be talking about is distortion. And technically distortion is just anything that alters the waveform of your sound, but you probably know distortion as this. Basically distortion just makes your stuff sound bad. Basically what distortion does is makes your sound more of like a square wave, which gives it that kind of distorted sound. Really the technical distortion is that it's anything that's changing the waveform of your sound. But this type of distortion right here is doing it in a very extreme way. Okay, so the next effect here is going to be a soft clipper. Basically it stops your sound from going over a certain threshold. However, instead of like distorting it really bad, like the other distortion that I showed you, it'll try to round it out and kind of preserve the original waveform of your sound, so it doesn't sound so weird and unnatural. So when it comes to clipping in general, there's hard clipping and there's soft clipping. There's also digital clipping, analog clipping. We're just talking about hard clipping and soft clipping. Hard clipping is kind of like the other distortion that I showed you. It changes your sound to make it more square, and it just gives it some of those weird harmonics and just distorted, bad sounding sounds. But like I was saying, a soft clipper kind of rounds out your sound. It makes it sound a little bit more natural. So soft clippers were actually created to kind of emulate the sound of pushing the levels on analog gear. Just because of the circuitry and the wiring in analog gear, it will kind of just naturally round out the sound instead of hard clipping it. So that's kind of where soft clippers come from. So the next effect that we have here is called saturation, and saturation basically just adds harmonics to your sound. So it'll add higher up frequencies to whatever you put the saturation plugin on. And again, this is something that was created to emulate analog gear, because naturally all or most analog gear has saturation just naturally because of the circuitry and wiring and transformers and all that type of good stuff. One thing about saturation plugins though is that they all sound different. So they're all going to add different frequencies, you know, specific to one plugin or another. So you kind of just have to play around and see which one you like best. But yeah, saturation is really cool and it's really useful in trying to get that like warm, analog-y, vintage type sound. All right, so the next effect that we're going to be talking about is a Bitcrusher / degrader, it might be called sometimes. But this one personally for me was the toughest to wrap my head around. I just could not understand like how it worked at first, but I think I got it down to a science. Basically, a Bitcrusher just lowers the quality of your actual sound. But I think the best way to explain this to you is with a little drawing, a little art project here. So this right here is our sound wave. And when we record this with our microphone onto our computer, it's going to record it in sections like this. The way it works when you record anything, it basically just takes a bunch of snapshots of your sound really quickly to form the complete sound that you're recording. And generally the number of snapshots that you're going to be taking is 44,100, 44.1K. You might have heard that before. That's the sample rate, and that basically means it's taking 44,100 snapshots per second of your sound, and that's how it's able to record it. So within each one of these slices, imagine there's 44,000 of them. It basically recorded data on the pitch and the volume of these individual parts of the sound. So the value that it's able to give, like let's say this portion of the sound right here, is called the bit depth. So you might have heard 32-bit, 16-bit, 8-bit, whatever bits you might have heard of. Let's say we have 8-bit, for example. It's going to divide this section into 8. So as you can see, we've got it divided into 8 here, and because it's in this little box, it's going to record the value within this box. So then this one down here, it's going to be recorded within here and also within here. But let's say, for example, we only have 2 bits to work with. The sound is only going to be recorded in this area, this area, this area, this area. So we go from a smoothish kind of waveform that looks like this to this really blocky and distorted waveform like this. So that's basically what the bits or bit depth is. When you lower it, it lowers the possible values that you can give to a specific piece of your sound. And when you lower the sample rate, it's basically lowering the number of times that that sound is recorded per second, which causes more audio errors within the sound, which is why you get that kind of like tinny high frequency sound when you lower the sample rate. So yeah, I know that was a lot of information and graphs and stuff like that, but basically the way that I think about it, just to make it a little easier to understand, is that the sample rate has to do with the pitch at which a sound is recorded, and the bit rate has to do with the volume within the specific slices. So the next one here is reverb. So reverb is just something that happens naturally all around us. Reverb is literally just the interaction between a sound and objects within the environment that basically causes the sound to keep going after it's already been made. Everything has reverb no matter where you are, because sound is always interacting with the environment. But yeah, there are different types of reverb. There's spring reverb, there's room reverb, plate reverb, stuff like that. But we're talking about digital reverb here today, because that's what pretty much any plugin that you have is digital reverb, and it's meant to model actual reverb or, you know, electromechanical reverbs. So with most reverbs, you're going to have a couple different parameters. You're probably going to have a room size thing. And then you're also probably going to have a decay knob, which is basically how long that reverb is going to last. And then you're also going to have a wet and a dry knob, which I probably should have mentioned. A lot of these effects are going to have wet and dry knobs. The dry signal is the input, the original sound that you're putting into it, and the wet signal is the affected sound. So yeah, that's reverb, pretty much a staple plugin. Everybody needs to have a reverb because you're going to use it on so many different things. All right, so the next one we're talking about is delay / echo. Echo is the real thing that a delay plugin is trying to emulate. An echo is basically just a reflection of a sound that returns to the person, but with a delay. So it's like when you're in a long tunnel and you go, hello, 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 hello. Delay plugins basically just do that. They duplicate your sound and play it back to you. With most delay plugins, you can adjust the time at which the delay is coming back, and then you can adjust the volume of that delayed signal. Some delays have really crazy fancy features and stuff, but you know, we're just keeping it simple here. So the next effect that we're talking about is going to be a phaser. Basically, a phaser is just a little filter that kind of sweeps through your sound as you play it. You can adjust how deep that filter is, how wide that filter is, how fast it's moving, stuff like that. So the next one is a flanger, which is kind of a more complicated effect. It's very similar to a phaser. It does the same thing where it kind of sweeps through your sound with a filter. However, a flanger has like really small delay times on it, so it creates this weird kind of like comb filter instead of just one big filtered area like a phaser. So yeah, flanger is a pretty cool effect. I like it better than a phaser personally. It just sounds a little bit cooler, but that's up to you. So the next one we have is another one of my personal favorite effects, which is a chorus. So basically the chorus is just duplicating a sound that you have to make it sound like there are more of that sound playing. So if you think about a chorus in real life, like people singing chorus, not everybody is going to sing the exact same way and at the exact same time and everything like that. So there's going to be slight little differences here and there, and that's kind of what a chorus does. You basically just have your original signal, and then it duplicates that original signal and kind of like modulates it, so it's, you know, wiggling around in pitch and like volume a little bit, and then that duplicated sound also has a little bit of a delay on it as well, and all these little details combined just come together and create that chorus sound that we all know and love. So the last two here are pretty similar, and they're kind of more guitar effects if anything, but the first one is vibrato, which basically just modulates the pitch of your sound, and then there's tremolo, which modulates the volume of your sound. If you ever done that thing when you're in elementary school where you cover your ears and uncover them really fast and you get that weird kind of sound, that's basically tremolo. And then vibrato is just the same thing but with pitch instead of volume. And both vibrato and tremolo plugins are going to have a knob where you can adjust the speed at which that's happening. You can adjust like how much it's modulating it. So yeah, that is pretty much going to do it for all the effects we got here today. Yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for me in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It took me a long time to research all this stuff, but hopefully you guys are able to understand it clearly. And now you have all this information in a nice, neat little package here. Let me know if I left out any specific effects that you wanted me to explain, but I think I got pretty much all of them in here. So yeah, I hope you learned something today. I definitely did. Make sure you guys go check out my Instagram and my SoundCloud down in the description below, along with the playlist of songs I produce, my beat store, my Discord, all that stuff. Go check it out if you'd like to do so, and I will see you guys next time.